Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. I'll tell you what, here's where I'll begin. I want to start very quickly with just kind of a hurricane update. I've watched endless footage now on YouTube, in particular again from Southwest Florida, and of course throughout Georgia, East Tennessee, North Carolina. But Florida got blasted from Hurricane Milton. And certainly any of the homes and establishments that are along the coast, they've been flattened. Endless aerial footage of this, drone footage of this all over YouTube. It's beyond awful. It's not getting a ton of coverage. Again, I know that the story went from it being a massive hurricane to being a smaller hurricane, smaller than expected, and then it just kind of faded away. Again, they got hit very hard. Fort Myers Beach has been wiped out. Inglewood, again, up and down the coast there on the west coast. Same thing with Punta Gorda. I saw footage of where I used to live when I first moved there in the historic district of Punta Gorda, and it's demolished. It's completely demolished. You have sailboats on top of tennis courts. You've got trash everywhere. Again, the flooding must have been massive. I certainly saw footage of the flooding in that general area. It was, at the very least, knee-high. And that's standing in the middle of the street, which means, of course, it would have come through doors and was flooding endless properties. Again, it's beyond terrible. I can't imagine them actually having any school of any kind, certainly not in that particular area, but there's just far too much damage. And again, I'm certain lives lost. Certainly when it comes to North Carolina, tens of thousands of lives lost, no doubt about it. And again, this isn't being touched by mainstream media, not in the slightest. It unfortunately is just one of those stories that falls out of favor and becomes repetitive for certain individuals, certainly in the mainstream and even in the alternative media, and then they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole anymore. But again, the devastation is massive. That continues to be the case just about everywhere where these hurricanes hit. And I would just continue to urge people to pray for these individuals because it's beyond horrible. Speaking of beyond horrible, let me get into this. This is, of course, something else that the mainstream media will not touch with a 10-foot pole. I first learned about this when I was browsing around on X the other day and did it when I was attempting to fall asleep. That was a bad idea because this kept me awake. The fact is the Israeli army, IDF, has bombed a hospital. And I'm going to read you this story, and again, the footage and the video footage and the pictures of this are beyond horrific as well. This is from presstv.ir. It was titled the following here: Palestinian refugees burned alive as Israel bombs tents at Deir al-Balash's hospital. Again, the footage here is beyond horrible. You have patients still in beds, hooked up to their IVs and hooked up to oxygen, and they're burning alive. It says the Israeli regime has bombed a refugee camp in the central part of the Gaza Strip, triggering a huge fire that killed Palestinians who were seeking refuge from the ravages of the regime's ongoing genocidal war. The attacks targeted a camp that sheltered displaced Palestinians at Martyrs Hospital in the city of Deir al-Balah in the early hours of Monday, killing at least 3 people and injuring around 70 others. Gaza Health Ministry said that the death toll is expected to rise as dozens of displaced Palestinians are feared dead. Here's the thing. Anybody not bringing this up and anybody not talking about this is the enemy. It really can't get any clearer here. The fact is it doesn't matter where these innocent people exist. If they're being slaughtered by governments like our government, of course, killing our own people on our homeland, and of course, Jews doing it to innocent Palestinians, who again are attempting to heal one another and not starve to death and 1,000 other things. These are massive war crimes, and anybody not bringing this up is your enemy. Certainly everybody on Fox News. No one on Fox News is going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. They'll never touch it. They'll never bring it up. Again, the battle lines here regarding who our enemies are becoming more and more defined by the day. Again, did Alex Jones bring this up? Probably not. Steven Crowder, did he bring this up? Probably not. How about Charlie Kirk over there? How about Big-headed Charlie Kirk. Did he bring this up at all? I'm certain he didn't. It's these individuals, again, that are the problem. These people are interested in clicks. They're not interested in telling the truth. They're too worried about money and popularity and control. They're not interested in telling the truth and being objective. Things are not one-dimensional here. This particular issue, of course, to some extent certainly is. You have individuals engaging in war crime, including our own government, who is participating in this, and of course who has boots on the ground overseas, which of course also is not being mentioned by the mainstream media, and probably not others as well, certainly those in the so-called alternative media. Again, if these individuals in these outlets that they all work with, again, regardless of the media outlet, if they are not bringing up the truth about what's going on both in our country and in foreign countries, where innocents, regardless of who they are being slaughtered, these people are the problem. These people are the enemy because, let's face it, they may operate here in the United States, but they cannot represent even us. And of course, they don't represent us. We didn't vote for them. We didn't vote for Fox News. I didn't vote for Real America's Voice. I didn't vote for Charlie Kirk or Sean Hannity to tell the truth or anything. I didn't appoint them to those positions. They're complete tools. It's a giant show that they put on. These are not objective human beings. These are the worst. Again, these people are our enemy. It's that simple. It's right here. It's absolutely right here. And it would be very funny and very interesting to watch what happens when their card gets pulled, in particular, the amount of money that they make and who pays them. Once people start figuring out that the Jewish lobby pays all of these individuals off, and that we need to stand with Israel no matter what, and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's inconsequential because it's war and there's collateral damage. Don't pay attention to that. The fact that, again, it was a series of tents of displaced individuals, and, again, it was a hospital and whatever else, and they were receiving medical treatment. Who cares? Collateral damage, collateral damage. These people are disgusting. They're not objective. Again, they're not interested in the truth. They're all traitors to our country. And they're seditious. And there need to be crimes against this and against them specifically. Again, you see the left-wing media lose their mind when it comes to Donald Trump talking about getting rid of the enemies of our country and expelling them and et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is that they shouldn't be the only ones losing their minds. It should be the right-wing media also, because they're just as guilty. Anybody, again, who's not telling the truth and being objective again, regarding what's going on at face value, they are the enemy. You cannot get on social media and not see these images. It's all over X. It's all over Gab. It's certainly, parts of it anyway, are on Telegram, even though I think Telegram to this stage is starting to get a little hinky to some extent when it comes to censorship. They don't want this imagery out there, even though it does make the rounds. But the entire, whatever you want to call it, the Israeli piñata is being destroyed here. Saving Israel for last, there is no doubt about it. You can't possibly stand with these people. They're even infighting, I might add, even inside their own country. You have Jews who don't like what's going on here. Now again, I don't necessarily trust that all the time either, but there are plenty of individuals who have a heart, and they fully understand that, frankly, this has to do with also slaughtering Christians. This is a Christian genocide. And you have so-called Christians in the United States supporting this. You want to really uncover sort of the, I guess I would call it, whatever, the quote-unquote racism and bigotry of the so-called individuals on both the left and the right. The fact is that they see brown people and they just assume overseas that they must all be Muslim. That's not true. Lots of them are Christians. The number of Christian Iraqis that were slaughtered back in the early 2000s is in the millions. The number of Palestinians that have been slaughtered who are Christians are in the millions. Same thing with Syrians. Plenty of them are Christians, slaughtered. This has to do with destroying Christianity under the fake shield of Israel, but also claiming again that they're all Muslim, or that they're all Hamas or Hezbollah or all these other made-up names that they just create. It's beyond disgusting. So I've gone hard after the Jews for a very long time. I'm not going to let up. I'm going to continue to do it because, again, by and large, they are the problem. This is a huge problem. And anybody taking money from them in the United States and not telling the truth about what's going on because they're more interested in their paycheck instead of actually telling the truth to the American people, those people are traitors. It's that simple. This is not complicated. These people are traitors. So when it comes to Donald Trump even using the Sedition Act of 1798 and getting rid of these people, you can expel Jews as a result. What you can also do is you can arrest right-wing media figures also for not doing what they're supposed to do and for not telling the truth. In particular, of course, if they're receiving money, which we know they all are, to not tell the truth. Don't cover this story. Here's a check. Here's your paycheck. Here's the memo we just emailed everybody on the record of what you're not allowed to talk about. Same thing with radio hosts. Saw Lynn Wood actually on Telegram go after Glenn Beck. That was refreshing. Lynn Wood knows exactly who Glenn Beck is. 100%. You've heard me go after Glenn Beck go after his throat for quite some time. He's a totally bought off piece of trash. He's not touching that story with a 10-foot pole either. Innocent men, women, and children being burned alive by Israelis. It's horrible. It's beyond horrific. But our enemy is right here. And again, when you hear people say that our enemy is right here, those are the people that people should be thinking about also. The Sean Hannitys of the world, the Glenn Becks of the world, you name it. Anybody, again, falsely referencing history on such a constant basis when in fact they're receiving memos and money that are telling them to not talk about particular things, and then when they don't, they get paid a certain amount of money as a result. This is treasonous behavior. There's no doubt about it. But these people have to go. And the best thing I think that we can do, of course, is to not listen to them, and then because they have social media accounts like the rest of us do, we need to flood their entire comment section with the truth. Whether it be factual videos about real history, whether it be, again, AI imagery or AI translation of Adolf Hitler's speeches in Glenn Beck's X feed, whatever it is. Same thing with Tucker Carlson, same thing with Sean Hannity. We need to flood these people's comment sections on social media with the truth and make it inescapable for them. Make them want to quit social media. Make them uncomfortable behind the microphone. And that's exactly, I think, one of the ways that we can do it. Yeah, we can ignore them, but they're still going to get paid. Because the Jewish lobby has these people by the back of the neck. They have them completely controlled. So that's not going to go away, but at the very least, they can be made to feel uncomfortable with the truth because they're clearly not interested in the truth. Now, moving on, and speaking of not interested in the truth, this happened the other day, a few days ago now. And it was beyond disgusting because when his name popped up, I thought to myself, that Vem Miller? Is this the Vem Miller that they're talking about being the so-called third assassination attempt being thwarted regarding Donald Trump? Vem Miller is a conservative podcaster and interviewer and researcher and journalist and filmmaker. And this was the individual who was detained and ticketed by California police because he was in possession of his own guns in California, even though he's a Nevada resident. I'll get into that section in a little bit here, toward the end of me describing this scenario. But a couple of years ago, Vem and some of his producers, or at least one of his producers out of Nevada, reached out to me and wanted to talk to me. Me personally, I thought they wanted to talk about the shot taking, specifically within the realm of American K-12 schools and university settings. Turned out that wasn't the discussion, which was fine, I guess. It wasn't my best interview in the world, but either way, it was late at night. Of course, they're based in Nevada, and I was based in Ohio, so it was late at night for me. But either way, we had a nice discussion. He's a nice guy. He's a truth teller. He's a hard worker, and he's a conservative. He's been a guest also on Stu Peters' show in the past. And this was the individual, again, that the Riverside police detained because he was in possession of his own guns and his own automobile. And he even told the police as he was driving into the actual rally, where he had a press pass to actually be there as an invited guest. They immediately again ransacked his car, and then they ran with the story that he apparently was attempting to assassinate President Trump. The entire thing turned out to be a complete lie. Now, who told the truth about the story when it was all said and done? The fact is Stu Peters did. And Mindy Robinson did, because Mindy Robinson works with him, works with Vem Miller. But where was Alex Jones on this? Where was Real America's Voice? Where was Charlie Kirk? Where was the so-called chief nerd on X and Vigilant Fox? All these dopes and all these wellness company losers, all these people that take that money and are owned by the Jewish lobby, ran with the story that he was attempting to assassinate Donald Trump. Have they redacted their stories and their claims and their false reporting on any of this? Or were they just interested in clicks? Were they just interested in attention? Again, these people disgust me because they shoot before looking, they leap before looking, and then when they're wrong, very rarely to never do they spend any time talking about being wrong, let alone giving the individual that they wronged the opportunity to tell what really went on. They're not interested in it. I'm not comparing myself to Vem Miller. I mean, what he's experienced is way worse. But what I am saying is that even back when I gave that school board speech a number of years ago about how the shots are killing people, and you do well to not take any ever again, there were a number of people who reached out to me, but lots of media outlets got everything that I was saying wrong, including those in the so-called alternative media. This is their problem. They don't do their due diligence. They aren't paying attention to anything. They leap before looking. Sean Brooks, an internal medicine specialist of over 20 years with an Oxford University of England medical degree, said the following. None of that's true. And I had to be the one to correct it. So I'm reaching out to people on social media and going, stop effing up my credentials. I know exactly where Vem Miller's been when it comes to that. When it comes to individuals getting something very wrong, that's not very difficult to understand, nor think about, nor clear up. Even if you suspect that you've gotten something wrong, reach out to the person, talk with them. Again, Vem Miller has cleared his name now because this entire thing was blown out of proportion. Again, conservative, journalist, filmmaker, researcher, podcast host, interviewer. He's on our side. But even the stories of the people attempting to cover their backsides now because they got it wrong at first, they're putting out all these stories like, who is this Vem Miller guy? Who is he? What's he doing? Let's learn more about him. People should already know who this guy is. He used to be the host of Blood Money, which was a channel on Rumble, and now he's again one of the creators and hosts of America Happens, which is again another channel on Rumble. This is well-known information. This is basic due diligence. So if Vem Miller ever listens to this, I want him to know I came to his defense. I put his Rumble video out there of him recording himself in a hotel room describing what had happened. And I put that out on all social media platforms, regardless of how small my accounts are. I still put it out there because it's the truth. And I hate people who get shit wrong. That isn't difficult to figure out. But there's an important lesson here. The lesson is that the devil always overplays his hand. And he gets everything wrong. But in the middle of all of this, God knows that the devil always overplays his hand. And as a result, what has God just shown everyone? He's shown everyone that all these individuals in the so-called alternative media and even on the right wing aren't interested in the truth, let alone righting a wrong and righting their own wrong. Therein lies the problem too. They don't want to do that either. Vem Miller was on Stu Peters for about 30 minutes, for the first 30 minutes or so in Stu Peters' episode on Monday night. And then Mindy Robinson was on next. Vem Miller openly stated that Laura Ingraham wanted to have him on the show to describe what happened and what went on. And then later on in the day, as Vem was waiting to be on Laura Ingram's show, Laura Ingram's producers got a hold of him and said, yeah, we're going to have to cancel because Fox News' lawyers aren't that interested really, and it's a big legal problem for them, and they don't want to have to deal with it, so we're just going to have to cancel. And then he ended up going on Stu Peters' show, no problem. Straight up. Just went on his show, told the truth about what went on, and that was the end of it. Again, Vem was appreciative of Stu Peters having him on and clearing things up, and how everybody, of course, got this wrong. There's endless lawyers involved now. Even Raheem Kassam from the National Pulse has worked with Vem before, knows who he is, put out an article there saying, you're all getting this wrong about Vem Miller. He wasn't trying to kill anybody. It was police trying to make an example of somebody. That's what this was all about. So again, these individuals who are interested in the clicks and the likes and the shares, and then, equally as bad, the people who don't do their due diligence and aren't willing to give Americans or anybody the opportunity to tell the truth when they themselves were the ones who made the mistake in the first place as a news outlet. That should tell you all you need to know about those news outlets, quote unquote, and the people who are behind them. It's all Jewish lobby, the entire thing. They don't ever want to be wrong. They don't ever want to make it look or sound as if they've gotten anything wrong. And if they do, again, it's just on to the next story. They're not going to spend a second apologizing. These people are disgusting. So again, I hope that this all works out for Vem Miller. I hope that he sues these people into the ground, including that police department and that specific arresting police officer. Vem Miller even said the feds and the Secret Service didn't want to bother talking to him because they knew that there was nothing to this here. It was just a straight up profiling arrest of a MAGA supporter, and that was the end of it. Again, it's gross. Now, beyond that, let me mention this. And this was a mistake that Vem made. And it's an undeniable mistake, but again, even from his own mouth, he openly said he's a gun novice. That he owns guns, but he's never shot guns before. The only reason he bought a couple of guns was to protect himself just in case, etc., etc. Most gun owners know that laws in one state don't necessarily equate to the gun laws in another. And to be honest, most people fully understand that California is a foreign country. Yes, it's a state in the United States, but it is truly a foreign country when it comes to numerous things. And certainly one of those is gun laws. There are endless gun shows and gun individuals and people who have channels on YouTube where they will drive toward California. They pull over on the side of the road in Arizona and Nevada. And then they basically, again, unarm themselves. They lock their guns away. They put their ammo in a separate case. They lock that away. They take the magazines out of all of their guns if they have them. They unload those. They put those separate. They lock them all away, keep them away, further than an arm's distance, and then they drive into California. Because these are the laws of California. And again, most gun owners also know that before you travel, you should certainly get online and research what are you allowed to do and not allowed to do when it comes to traveling with guns from one state to the next. Apparently, Vem Miller didn't do that, which is too bad. Again, he also didn't have to tell police officers that he had guns in his car. It's no one's business. This is not something that you have to do. By and large, it certainly isn't something that you have to do. You don't have to do this in the state of Ohio anyway. You did for a little while, so they said, but you don't have to now. If you get pulled over and you get asked whether or not you have guns in the car, it's not the cop's business. They've run your plates, so they already know if you're a gun owner or you aren't. They run your plates, on your automobile, so they already know if you're a concealed carry permit holder or you're not. They already have plenty of information. It's none of their business. And the last point, I think, is that you don't have to answer any questions from police officers under any circumstance. They start asking you questions. You can look at them and you can say, my lawyer has instructed me to not answer any of your questions. Again, in Vem's situation, based on what he has openly stated, the police officer didn't ask him, as bad as this police officer was, and as corrupt as he is, and certainly biased as he is, he didn't ask Vem if Vem had guns in the car. Vem openly told him this. That was a mistake. Again, Vem should have left his guns either, again, at home, or he should have, again, looked up online how to transport them from one state to the next, certainly into California, and how to do that legally. It's a checklist, that's all. It's just a bullet-pointed checklist, essentially, of particular things that you need to do. Again, this is easy information to look up. But that's really, again, what got Vem in this situation is he was being too honest, apparently, with his police officer, and then he didn't have his guns properly stored in his automobile. So again, anytime a person travels from state to state, look that up first. If it's if your concealed carry permit gives you reciprocity from one state to the next, then you can carry your gun loaded on your person. It doesn't have to be locked away in any way. But if there's no reciprocity with a concealed carry permit that you're in possession of, then yeah, you got to store away your weapons and your ammo, and you have to keep them separate and the whole thing. Again, I don't like it any more than the next person. This is an infringement on our Second Amendment rights from a federal standpoint. Everybody knows this. This has been discussed at length on endless shows. But that was the mistake that Vem made. And then, of course, trusting California police and assuming that they would be honest and forthright and whatever else, when in fact the sheriff of that county just flat out ran with the story, puffed his chest out, stuck his nose up in the air, and openly stated, well, I think we thwarted another assassination attempt, and you need to vote for me because I'm the sheriff who's going to be your last line of defense. That sheriff just showed himself to be a traitor. He showed himself to be a traitor to our country and to all Californians in one action. That's all it took. So again, in that situation, I would say that God used Vem to expose so much more. It's not just bad California gun laws, which was discussed on Stu Peters' show. It's beyond that. It's the fact, again, that these sheriffs and these police officers are not our last lines of defense. That's number one. But also that people have to do their due diligence about these unconstitutional laws and understand what they are. And if we know that there's bad cops out there, which there certainly are, they're not all bad, but a lot of them are, that as a result of all of that, we have to understand that these individuals are looking for any reason to write a ticket. Again, you heard me say in a previous episode where I was talking about America not being prepared, that police officers love a crisis, in particular power outages and a number of other things, weather scares and you name it, because they know that people will be traveling from point A to point B to try to right wrongs and fix something and correct something, but that's not going to stop them from writing you a speeding ticket. Oh, look, all the green lights and the red lights and the stoplights and whatever else that at these intersections, they're all out because of power outages and trees down, et cetera, et cetera. But that person just blew through one of the non-existent lights, so let's go write them a ticket. They didn't make a full stop at that non-existent light that doesn't work anymore. Let's go write them a ticket. These people exist. So we have to be aware of that. We have to know that that's a thing. So again, my best to Vem in all of this. I hope he sues the ever-living shit out of that police department and certainly that individual cop who arrested him. It's beyond terrible, but again, this exposed so much more. It exposed the corrupt media. It exposed their agendas. It exposed that when they're wrong, they're not interested in righting that wrong. They're just interested in moving on to the next thing and memory holing it as much as possible. These people are our enemy. No doubt about it. There was also this, which was bouncing around from Zero Hedge the other day. U.S. military now authorized to kill Americans on U.S. soil? Question mark. It says the following here just very quickly. It says just ahead, intriguingly, of the November elections, the U.S. military has granted itself permission to unleash lethal force on the civilian population in cases of quote-unquote national security emergency. It says, quote, as the U.S. prepares for one of the most controversial and closely watched elections in U.S. history, its concerning update to the Department of Defense Directive 5240.01 has quietly been put into effect. Reissued on September 27th of 2024, this directive governs the Department of Defense intelligence activities and now includes provisions authorizing lethal force, in certain circumstances when assisting civilian law enforcement. While the directive forbids assassination, it opens the door to lethal interventions under national security conditions. This can go both ways. This could be used against an Antifa kind of establishment, or it can be used, of course, against innocent civilians who are asking questions. But this is a problem. And again, if this also means going after illegal aliens and doing whatever needs to be done to round them up and get rid of them, well, it's possible it could be used against them as well. Which kind of ties in this particular post on Great Awakening, which I wanted to read here. It says the following, quote, a potential military response if the Dems follow through with their plan to not certify Trump's election. We, of course, know that Representative Jamie Raskin, multiple jabbed cancer victim Jewish guy, has openly stated that he's not going to certify the election and that individuals in the House of Representatives and the Senate have the right to not certify the election if Donald Trump wins. Well, again, that would be treason. That would be sedition. A duly elected president, and then, of course, individuals in the House of Congress not certifying it. You'd have to round those people up and imprison them. It says the following here. It says, if the Dems were to follow through with their threat to block DJT's certification, a position that this would, or a post rather, that this would be a golden opportunity for the military to step in, assuming the Brunson case remains in SCOTUS's inbox. And since the underpinnings are all the situation, or rather of this situation, is treason, JAG could take the reins with a trial laying out all for the world to see, the thousands of depositions, testimony, documentation, and video evidence of the 2020 election fraud. Once all this information finally sees the light of day, then the Brunson solution, quote-unquote, would be an automatic, unquote. It would certainly be interesting, and again, to use the word transparency. In the full interest of that word, you would have to continue to bring all of this evidence to the American public in an unbiased way and in a very direct way to where the evidence is overwhelming that there was election fraud, not just in 2020. Again, there was rampant election fraud in 2018 also, certainly probably in 2016 as well. But every single year there's been election fraud. But you have to bypass the mainstream media. You have to get this information into everyone's hands visually so that there's absolutely no denying it. And again, the evidence, as we already know, is overwhelming that there's been voter fraud. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the voter fraud that's taking place right now for this current election where people are already voting is overwhelming. There's just too much of it already going on. Illegals are being allowed to vote in endless states. Ballots and endless stacks of ballots are already being falsely created and falsely filled out and then dumped off in these ballot boxes en masse. There's already video footage of this. This is undeniable. But any of these so-called, again, media pundits not talking about this open voter fraud, it's overwhelming. But yes, these are the kinds of people who need to be rounded up. That has to happen. There is this too. I find this highly suspicious and frankly, a bit positive and really interesting. Almost proves that we're kind of watching a show to some extent. Because why would Biden not renew this? This was from boundless.com, and it was also from Reuters. So this is, again, these are not right-wing news outlets here. It was titled, Biden administration will not renew legal status for hundreds of thousands of migrants from 4 countries. It says the move leaves many of those migrants without a clear path to legal residency. Again, this was almost 8 days ago. It says the article at a glance here is end of temporary program. The Biden administration announced that it will not renew a 2-year humanitarian parole program for migrants from Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, and Nicaragua. Why not? It seems like this would be something that he would sign off on. Unless, of course, he's not the real commander-in-chief, which we know he isn't. It says no extensions. Migrants under the program will not receive an extension and must find alternative legal means to remain in the United States or face deportation. This is the last thing that they wanted. It says who's affected. Nearly 530,000 migrants arrived under the program, with over 96,000 from Nicaragua facing the most uncertainty. It says exceptions. Haitians and Venezuelans may qualify for temporary protected status. It says Cuban migrants can apply for green cards under the Cuban Adjustment Act. And then it says what's next? Migrants are being advised to seek other legal statuses such as asylum or leave the United States when their parole expires. They're not going to leave unless they're rounded up and done away with. That's the only way they leave. This again regarding the Illegal Alien and Sedition Act of 1798. The problem with this is, again, back when it was written, it was believed that when these individuals are caught and found, that they will just go back to their home countries on their own accord. I'm not optimistic about that one. I think these people are going to dig in. This is why these individuals, again, are arming themselves. This is why individuals are selling them guns, and they're able to apparently acquire guns. This is why they're taking over places like Aurora, Colorado, and these apartment complexes, which, by the way, that story also is far worse than what endless people have been discussing, and it's been brought to endless people's attention from the people who actually live there. The people who live there have been telling the truth while the mainstream media is gaslighting everybody. These illegals are going to dig in like ticks. And if they're armed, then you're backing this armed tick back into a corner. So, how are they going to operate? What is it that they're going to do? How are they going to behave? They're not going to go quietly. That's not going to happen. And I'm not saying that some of the innocents won't say, okay, look, I'm going to turn myself in because I want to go back home because I don't want to spend time in an American jail. It's basic math that it's inevitable that some of them will want to go back on their own accord. But at the exact same time, the armed ones and the criminally minded ones, no. These people are going to stab and shoot their way to try to stay here, or stab or shoot their way to keep themselves from being rounded up and forced to go back to where they came from. So as I've said before in previous episodes, people need to prepare for this. And unfortunately, one of the environments that is not prepared for this is the American schooling system and the university and college system, both K-12 through university. They aren't prepared for this. These environments have been taking in illegal aliens for a very long time. When it comes time for them to go back, because the National Guard shows up and ICE shows up and starts knocking on doors and doing what they're legally obligated to do, again, those are soft targets. Classroom environments in schools are soft targets. What would keep anybody from believing that they wouldn't run into a school in an attempt to hide or hold anybody hostage? These are not scenarios the American school system has considered because they're not that bright. They don't think about warfare. They don't think situationally about anything. These are do-gooders. These are people in these positions, certainly in the administrative roles by and large, that do what they're told. That's why they get paid what they get paid. They don't get paid to think. That's not in their job description. They don't ask them in an interview, so how much of a thinker are you exactly? Are you a thinking person? Because if you were to say yes after being asked such a question, you'd be shown the door and your resume would be torn into pieces and tossed in the trash. They want order followers. They want people who don't think. That's what the positions call for. Again, they're not safe environments. The closer we get to the election, and certainly regarding everything that will happen after the election, these are not safe environments. All those videos that you saw in the past, again in 2016 and in 2020 and all the years in between, regarding American school teachers flipping out in classrooms and administrators flipping out in schools, again, certainly regarding whichever political party seems to take control, so to speak, or however someone wants to define all of that. The fact is all those videos are going to hit the mainstream like you won't believe. They'll be all over social media all over again. It's not an accident that more and more schools are doing away with the business of cell phones because, again, they don't want to catch teacher reactions. They don't want to catch administrative reactions. That was one of the elements of the cell phone issues, too, that was going largely unmentioned. Students were catching teachers embarrassing themselves professionally by being unprofessional, thereby creating more work for the administrators. Now, if they were logical managers of said environments, you would think that they would be appreciative that minors were catching adults being unprofessional. And then they could get rid of those unprofessional adults and then hopefully fill the position with someone who is professional. You would think that this would be the case. This is not the case. That's not why, again, they're not interested in that. They're interested in, so they think, not making more work for themselves, because that's how they view it. They don't view it as keeping the environment safe from lunatic educators, so to speak, and these indoctrinators. They view it as it being too much of a hassle for them and creating more work and creating a commotion that they don't want to deal with. That's why they've done away with cell phones in large part too. Because too many students were catching these people being lunatics. So before, during, and after this upcoming election here, where people again are already voting, what do you think is going to happen? Those students are still going to pull out those cell phones. Those students are still going to start recording their teachers' political reactions to the results of particular things, the lecturing that they all do with students, and a number of other things. Again, it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. But it's indicative of the environment because the environment of, again, American schools is an unsafe one. Now, getting back to voter fraud just very quickly, I wanted to read this too. This is a well-done article. This was on Substack. It's called Michael's Religion of Common Sense. And it is Michael Suede, if I'm saying that right, SUEDE.substack.com. It was titled, Federal Judge in Maryland Set to Rule on Banning the Entire U.S. Postal Service from Handling Ballots This Election. It says if you aren't familiar with the background of this case, prepare to have your mind blown. This isn't that long, so bear with me as I read this. It's interesting. It says, so here's the background. In 2020, a ballot company in Michigan was given contracts to print millions of ballots for counties all across the country. This ballot company illegally printed excess ballots beyond what they were contracted to produce for each county. The company then sent those excess ballots to a building in Flushing, New York. Again, you can see the conspiracy to commit fraud here. We're talking about counties in Michigan in one state and then sending them to multiple counties in multiple states. It says the building in Flushing was staffed by about 100 people who were associated with the radical left SEIU Union. The SEIU Union members were then filling out those ballots and then sending the completed ballots to a USPS facility in Bethpage, New York, where the ballots were reintegrated with the normal mail system. We were alerted to this happening because of a whistleblower report made by trucker Jesse Morgan, you may recall him, who became suspicious after delivering loads of completed ballots from the Bethpage facility to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It turned out that the criminals in Bethpage put the ballots on the wrong truck, Morgan's truck, who then delivered them to Lancaster. When Morgan got to Lancaster, he was held up for hours because his trucking company didn't match the company the criminals in Lancaster were expecting. This divine mix-up is what led Morgan to discover what was going on. Based on Morgan's affidavit, which watchdog group called the American Project filed suit to uncover who was paying for the shipments to and from Bethpage. During the investigation, it was discovered that the Bethpage facility was not set up to handle first-class mail. So there should have been no ballots going through that facility at all. Morgan states he transported 20 massive bins containing at least 50,000 ballots each to Lancaster. So his one truck alone was transporting more than 1 million fake ballots, quote unquote. Remember, these ballots are official ballots printed by a licensed ballot printing agency, so no amount of counterfeiting detection measures would have discovered them. There were at least 8 other trucks from the other criminally operated company that were making deliveries around the country just like this. That puts grand total around 12 to 13 million fake ballots that were shipped across the country that we know of. Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne believes there was another similar operation going on in the South with a company named Runbeck. Remember all these names? It says after Morgan came forward with his story, he said he was immediately picked up by the feds and held in dungeon for 9 hours, where he was interrogated and threatened. He says he reluctantly signed a retraction letter after the feds had threatened to kill him and his family. The American Project obtained affidavits from workers at the Bethpage facility detailing the entire chain of command and what happened during the election, which validate Morgan's story. The one critical piece of information they were missing was who paid for all of these shipments to occur. Well, I think we know who paid for it, don't we? It says, for the last 4 years, the American Project has fought various federal agencies with FOIA litigation to uncover who paid for those shipments. During this litigation, some very bizarre things were uncovered. To start with, the United States Postal Service facility in Bethpage was not set up to handle first-class mail, so they did not have the required optical scanning machines needed to take pictures of the ballots before they entered the mail system. That means that if the AP is right about what occurred, there would have been tens of millions of ballot images missing from the Postal Service system. I say would have been because, as you'll see, the evidence was destroyed. Next, it was discovered that the USPS changed their document retention policy just for the months surrounding the election, so that instead of retaining documents for 6 years, they would only retain them for 90 days. Then immediately following the election, they changed the retention policy back to 6 years. They did this without any notice and comment period, as it is required by federal law. They managed to get around this law by getting federal Judge Emmett G. Sullivan to sign off on their circumvention of the rules. It says he is the same judge that tried to illegally run his own prosecution of General Mike Flynn after the DOJ tried to drop the case. Despite the destruction of evidence, the AP kept pressing their FOIA lawsuit forward and ended up in front of a non-corrupt liberal judge. The AP was able to prove that the USPS did in fact still have some records of who paid for those shipments, so the judge ordered the USPS to turn over the documentation. The USPS eventually responded by turning over payment invoices for the days in question, but used whiteout to hide the names of the company who paid for the ballot shipments. They are still refusing to disclose who paid for the shipments, even though they are in direct violation of a federal judge's order to do so. The legal team for the USPS informed the judge that they told the USPS to comply, but they are refusing to follow their own legal team's directions. Finally, an affidavit was filed in September by the USPS supervisor saying they don't have the information the judge is ordering them to turn over. Following the affidavit, the AP filed suit, case 8:24-CV02442-ADC in Maryland, explaining to a federal judge that clearly the USPS is lying and that they were engaging in fraud and trying to cover it up. They are asking for the judge to bar the USPS from any involvement in the election. The judge is set to rule on this within the next week. Given the proximity of the elections, or to the elections rather, it's unlikely that the judge will bar the entire USPS from being involved in the handling of mail-in ballots, but there is a decent chance that the judge will allow third-party supervision of the system to make sure this doesn't happen again. And then it says Patrick Byrne gives a summary of the case so far in his X post. It's going to happen anyway. It's already happening. It's already happening. The simple fact that you have these drop boxes, the simple fact that you can have endless people, certainly in numerous states, in particular left-wing and swing states, so to speak, even though the swing states aren't really swing states, but they're telling everybody they are, like Georgia, North Carolina, what have you, which have always been red. But either way, this is already taking place in those states. Again, not to mention illegals voting. It's certainly a rampant problem, and this is, again, I think a dam that is just ready to burst here. So I don't know what's going to happen before, on the day of the election, or certainly after, but there has to be, again, some kind of a shutdown of this, or certainly a giant catching of all of these individuals who are engaging in this illegal voting. It's happening everywhere. There's no doubt about it. Okay, moving on to education. I want to bring this up here because, again, this is another update and a couple of interesting happenings. At the Central Ohio, Franklin County in the Columbus area, Westerville City Schools board meeting, which just took place this past week, or this week, actually. There were a couple of things. First of all, as you've been aware of because I've covered this district at length, they're putting a levy on the ballot. At least two levies. They're putting a library levy on the ballot for all of their school libraries, which is completely absurd. And then, of course, they're putting a tax levy for their entire school district on the ballot, which, of course, is going to cost copious amounts of money. I've been over those costs in the past before. What's interesting is before the treasurer specifically went over, again, basically all their money woes and how essentially it's all their fault, even though they never take blame for their own actions. They gave their state report card from an academic standpoint report. And it too was equally as embarrassing. As you've heard me say, in the state of Ohio, they use a star system. These star systems, of course, based on, I believe, at least 5 parameters, are all wrapped up in statistics, so they would lead people to believe, but they've dumbed it down by making it a star system, just like Mario Party. So depending on how many stars you get out of 5 stars, that's supposed to measure, again, how successful you are based on current state standards, or certainly the current state measure at that particular time. This particular school district overall, which is a large school district in the state of Ohio with 3 high schools, they received 4 stars out of 5, which is approximately an 80%, but when it came to literacy, they received 3 stars out of 5, which is a 60%. It's horrible. So again, they work very hard to manipulate everything to make it look as if they are academically succeeding when in fact they are not. Which kind of leads me to this particular statistic also, which has to do, of course, with quote-unquote COVID, which doesn't exist. But what does exist are shot recipients who are remarkably ill. Their chronic absenteeism as a school district regarding student attendance in 2017 was 8.7%. Their chronic absenteeism now is 17.9%. So 2 things have increased during that time. The influx of minority students and illegal aliens, and shot recipients. Both of these are factors as to why your chronic absenteeism has increased. It's that simple. Now, they can't help the fact that they're being flooded with illegal aliens. And they can't help the fact that more minorities are attending their school district than ever before. And there's a direct correlation as to both of those elements and, of course, chronic absenteeism. With that said, the one thing that they could control was encouraging individuals to not take the shots, because they could have said something like, "We don't know what's in these. We don't recommend this. This seems remarkably fast and a bit absurd, and it seems suspicious," and what have you. But like all American school districts, they fell for it. They all fell for what government was telling them. They referenced the CDC, they referenced their county health departments, they referenced strangers on television, and then they all believed it and they injected themselves and then encouraged everybody to do the same. As a result, now they have lost at least 3 custodians to sudden death. One died back in September 24th, I believe, and they made mention of him yet again in this board meeting. I believe this is the 3rd custodian that has died. They also had at least 5 resignations, or they're calling them retirees. But these are not individuals who have taught here for very long. Some of them have taught here for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 some odd years, and they're retiring. Quote unquote retiring. They could just be resigning. But again, they're labeling it as a retirement. I have certain questions about that too, as to why that is the case. Are they sick? Are they chronically ill? Can they not stay in their positions because they're injected? See, these are not questions that the business asks themselves, and no one is asking of the business, which is why these multi-million-dollar corporations called American schools are crumbling to the ground, and we have to let them do so. Which now leads me into their levy talk. This was fantastic. 3 speakers came up to the lectern to talk about the levy. In fact, I should mention this because this was very pathetic. The first 2 speakers who came up were seniors in high school. 2 girls. They came up and they said, "We understand you have more important things to talk about, but the thing that we're interested in talking about is whether or not you can allow seniors at our high school to paint their parking spots. That in this giant war that is going on, this massive genocide, the most important thing for 2 seniors and 2 senior females is whether or not their parking spots are allowed to be painted by themselves as their seniors at their school." This right here should show you the level of brainwashing that has taken place within this business. And then after the 3 presentations took place from 3 men talking about the levy and the unconstitutional actions that this board has taken regarding LifeWise in the past and that Christian program, every board member down the line complimented the 2 girls for speaking at the lectern about painting their parking spaces, but they didn't mention a single word about what any other speaker had to say. In fact, one of the male speakers was interrupted by the board president. I'll get into that in a minute. I'm not going to play the audio, but I'll describe it because the audio was too choppy. In fact, at the beginning of the video, the person who put the video together apologized for the choppiness of the audio, so they can't even get that straight. They can't run a microphone, ladies and gentlemen, let alone a multi-million-dollar business. So here's what happened. The first speaker was the same Doug Krinsky guy who shows up and goes, "Hello, board, I'm here to talk about the levy." And he cut into him again. And he openly said after the treasurer's presentation, which was her presentation before the public comments, someone in the audience tried to ask her a question when she was giving her presentation. She turned and looked at him and said, "I'm not taking questions from the audience, I'm addressing the board's questions." And then that was it. So there was a little mix-up there and a little I don't know, kerfuffle, as it were, which was kind of funny. Either way, that happened. And then the first individual, the Doug Krinsky guy who shows up, he starts talking about the levy. And basically what he says is he says there's no way that anybody should support this levy, not just because the treasurer is openly manipulating the numbers regarding the levy and how much people are going to be taxed, but all of their academic performance has dropped from 2014 in almost every category, regardless of grade. That it's dropped at least 7 to 8, upwards of 13, 15% in math, reading, literacy, science, you name it. So he openly says, why in the hell should we give you more money when you clearly are decreasing in academic performance? Because money doesn't equate to academic performance. Now, as you know, school districts across America would blame, quote-unquote, COVID and the pandemic and that disruption, which was caused by them. They didn't have to close their schools. They didn't have to mask anybody. It could have been business as usual, but it wasn't. They fell for the lie, and now they're paying for it. So that was the first speaker. And again, he referenced his Facebook group that's going after these individuals, and it's absolutely fantastic. The next guy who spoke shows up and he openly states that the district and their treasurer are lying about the finances, and that the county auditor even knows and has openly stated that there's no reason for Westerville to have a levy because their money and their numbers are being manipulated. That based on the county auditor's report, Westerville doesn't need a levy, and the amount of money that they're telling people about regarding this levy and what have you, and what they want to do on this ballot in November, is not accurate. And this guy shows up and says that. You would think that the board would come back and say, well, actually, here's why they would say that, or let me explain ourselves a little bit better, and blah, blah, blah. They stayed dead silent. They were dead silent on the issue. They didn't address it whatsoever. Beyond embarrassing. Because when somebody comes up to the lectern and calls you out for being a liar and you don't even defend yourself, you're a liar. That's what that means. The third speaker who spoke, God bless this guy too. He spoke out regarding the LifeWise stuff and needing LifeWise in the school and how you're discriminating against Christians. This is unconstitutional and a number of other things. He said this is another reason why no one should vote for a levy, because you're openly discriminating against Christians. And then what he did is he openly said this. He said, now, I'm going to read an email that was sent out to the public from the board members about your new hire and your new board member who happens to be a Muslim. He said, I'm going to read your own email. He said, I hope that you won't interrupt me. And he starts to read this email, and he makes mention of the name of one of the board members who's up there that is in this email that went out to the public. The board president interrupts him and then threatens to throw him out if he continues to read the email. This is a public record. This guy is reading a public record, on the record, at a lectern in a public board meeting, from the board members themselves to the public regarding their new Muslim board member, and he's not allowed to read that email. That's a violation of his First Amendment. He then, of course, openly states, well, we'll see what happens. He said Second Amendment, but he meant First. He said, we'll see what happens regarding your violation of the First Amendment and what will come of this. He said, but this is interesting, and I just want to be on the record as having stated that you're keeping me from reading an email that you all sent out to the public on the record in this board meeting. He may have FOIA'd that email. It's quite possible, again, he didn't open records requests, and that's how he obtained it. Doesn't matter. Either way, and he's allowed to read it. But these board members are so butthurt, and they're so afraid of the truth coming out that they're quite literally stomping on people's First Amendment constitutional rights to speak, that they don't think that's even going to back up on them. It's like what I said in the last episode and what I've said in endless episodes. It's like a fly trap. You set these fly traps for these flies and they always run right into it. You give these individuals an opportunity to violate everyone's constitutional rights, they'll do it without even thinking. So my hope is that in the next board meeting, whenever that takes place, this same guy comes back with a lawyer, or another lawyer comes up and says, I'm speaking on behalf of so-and-so. You violated his constitutional rights, and now I'm going to read this email in its entirety. And if you interrupt me, I'm going to sue you for violating his constitutional rights to free speech. Now, he could have said that. He didn't. But either way, this is the problem. These are communist-minded individuals who work within these buildings and within these school districts and certainly sit on these boards. Again, you can't do that. You can't interrupt someone from reading an open records request or reading a public email that was sent out to the public regarding, again, a board member. You don't get to interrupt him. He can say whatever he wants. And then threatening to throw him out, it's beyond absurd. I would have kept reading it and saying, and again, said, you're violating my constitutional rights. I'll sue you in your personal capacity. And if you have me removed, I'll sue the individual who removes me. This is my time. I'm allowed to read it. Don't interrupt me again. And then keep going. Make them cuff you. Make them cuff you and take you out. And then sue them. I mean, this is ripe for the picking. These people. If they just did this, the message they would send would be absolutely incredible. It'd put this school district right back on the front pages again. Board member interrupts individual speaking publicly about an email that was written that is public record during the public comments section of a public meeting and has him arrested and removed. Remember all that stuff when it happened during the COVID lie and parents were being removed from board meetings in handcuffs? That didn't work out well for those school districts. Now the COVID lie is behind everybody, although it's still fresh in some morons' minds, but either way, they're still violating people's constitutional rights. People need to take a stand against this, make them arrest you, and then sue them into the ground. I should also mention this, and this was an interesting element too. The last speaker, when he showed up before he was interrupted, he introduced his speech by saying, "Happy Columbus Day." It was great. Happy Columbus Day, everybody. And he looks around the room and looks at the board members, and what happens at the end of the board meeting? The board president says, "First of all, Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, everybody. Just wanted to make mention of that." They're spitting in your face. They're spitting in your face, and they're asking you to take more. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. These businesses are crumbling. Let them crumble. Let them crumble with a lack of attendance. People are dying in these environments from the shots they took. The children inside are being brainwashed because the teachers are brainwashed and so are the administrators. They're trying to rebuild their buildings and bring in new architecture and new engineers to restructure their buildings and waste all of the money on that instead of focusing on just teaching the truth. And then they give all the attention to two girls in the public comments section for wanting to paint their parking spots, but they make no mention of the fact that they were called out for being frauds and liars. It's glaring. It's absolutely glaring. Let the business crumble. It's astounding to me, and I love it. Let me move on to this. This should prove to people again that more people are waking up, and I love stories like this. This was from the Daily Mail. It was titled, this was back on October 12th. It was titled, "Adolf Hitler had, quote, some good ideas, unquote. A fifth of Gen Z Americans believe, according to Daily Mail poll." It says, Adolf Hitler's reign of terror led to the murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust in the darkest moments in history. That's the first line. But the Daily Mail themselves, nice picture of Adolf and the boys, by the way. But again, they engaged in a poll. And they basically, again, stated, it says here, 70% said he was evil, 12% said they were unsure, and a surprising 11% believe he had some redeeming qualities. This is great. I'm shocked that it's that low, frankly. I mean, people don't read books. I think I went over this on the show, or certainly in the war video, and definitely on Gab, that colleges are graduating students and high schools are graduating students who have never read a book in their life. That children not reading nonfiction in school is a serious problem. This is why your literacy rates always hover around anywhere from 50 to 75%. It's because they're not reading factual books. I would love for high school students and even middle school students to read Mein Kampf. I would love for that to be the case. By and large, of course, it's not happening. They're afraid that they're going to, get in trouble for reading a book. Only in a communist country could you get in trouble for reading a book. And here's an interesting breakdown of this particular poll, if it's to be believed. And again, this is between 18 to 29-year-olds. It says 1 in 5 black voters and 1 in 5 18 to 29-year-olds think Hitler had some good ideas. So again, Hitler had some good ideas was 11%, with 12% unsure and 77% saying that he was evil and had no redeeming features. Believe it or not, the race breakdown of this that has the largest is Hispanics. 19% of Hispanics said that he had some good ideas. 27% said that they were unsure, and 54% said that he was evil or had no redeeming features. Again, it's not an accident either that his speeches are being translated into English and making their way all over X and all over Gab. You can't be on those two social media platforms and not come across them. Millions of views of his speeches and Dr. Joseph Goebbels' speeches on YouTube. It's amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm going to continue to play them in the war videos if you like listening to them. I'm going to continue to highlight them. They're remarkably motivational. They're incredibly accurate to what went on back then and what's gone on since, including right now. It's 100% accurate. Not an evil man. He did exactly what had to be done. No, there weren't the 6 guerrillion killed. That didn't happen. More white Christians were murdered during World War II than any other race of people. There were no gas chambers. None of that happened. The Holocaust was fake. All of this is provable. But again, it backs up on the existence of books. That thing that American K-12 schools and universities don't like. And therein lies your problem. They're not education environments. They're indoctrination environments. Finally, there's this. Jab related. There was a study that was published here, there was a study that was published in the International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice, and Research. It was titled, "At least 55 Undeclared Chemical Elements Found in COVID-19 Vaccines from AstraZeneca, CanSino, Moderna, Pfizer, Sinopharm, and Sputnik V with precise ICP-MS. Here's what the abstract says, and it's alarming. In particular, the last third of this. It says, quote, "The experimental vaccines supposedly invented to combat COVID-19 were coercively forced upon the global population beginning late in 2020. They have precipitated innumerable and varied disease conditions ranging from mild to lethal. This increase in health disorders and sudden deaths began to manifest concomitantly with the number of people inoculated and doses administered per person. By the end of 2023, 24 undeclared chemical elements, it says, had been detected by scanning electron microscopy, coupled with energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, which is SEM-EDX, in the COVID-19 vaccines of the different brands by various research groups from different countries around the world. It says, in this paper, we report laboratory results from high-precision inductivity coupled plasma mass spectrometry, or ICP-MS, that confirm and expand previous results by SEM-EDX. To this end, the contents of vials from different lots of the brands AstraZeneca/Oxford CanSino Biologics, and then Pfizer-BioNTech, Sinopharm, Moderna, and Sputnik V were analyzed. Among the undeclared chemical elements were detected 11 of the 15 cytotoxic lanthricides used in electronic devices and optogenetics, it says. In addition, among the undeclared elements were all 11 of the heavy metals. It says this then in conclusion. Chromium was found in 100% of the samples, arsenic in 82%, nickel in 59%, cobalt and copper 47%, tin 35%, cadmium, and then lead and manganese were found in 18%, and mercury in 6%. A total of 55 declared chemical elements were found and quantified with ICP-MS. Combining these findings with results from SEM-EDX, altogether, 62 undeclared chemical elements have been found in the various products, in all brands, we found, boron, calcium, titanium, aluminum, arsenic, nickel, chromium, copper, gallium, strontium, niobium. The next one was molybdenum, if I'm saying that right, barium, and hafnium. It says, with ICP-MS, we found that the content of the samples is heterogeneous. The element composition varies in different aliquotes extracted from the same vial, unquote. Not good. Now we know what's actually in it. Again, it's been openly stated that there is no mRNA, quote unquote, in these shots. There is, however, copious amounts of metals. There's no doubt about it that there's copious amounts of nanotechnology and self-forming nanotech. But this right here, to my knowledge, is the first time of a percentage breakdown. Arsenic, ladies and gentlemen. 82% of arsenic. Chromium in 100% of all of them. It's in all of them. No wonder people have central nervous system illness. No wonder they're shedding on one another. No wonder people are coughing uncontrollably. They're being poisoned. So here's what I've done with that particular study. I've included it in the list on my website of the COVID mask articles, and as you scroll down from the most old being at the very top to the most recent being toward the bottom, it's the one that's toward the bottom when it comes to, again, the actual COVID shot articles. So it's there for your reference if you are interested. Again, thank you for listening, everybody. I appreciate it, and I will catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.